Good morning and welcome. It's the Patriot Radio News Hour live on this Friday, September the 29th. The third quarter is almost over, but it's so good that it's another Friday. We made it through another week. I'm Joe Jaquin, CEO of the Patriot Trading Group. Our toll-free number, 800-951-0592. The website at allamericangold.com. We keep you in the know out there. Everything you need to know and so much more is out there. You can shop online. You can watch all the videos and read all the articles and do all those things. You can be out there all day long, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm a little tired today. Last night, my son, they had a varsity football game, which they won. They're now 6-0. But after the game, and the game took forever, a lot of penalties, and it just makes the game last forever. But the bus, they were away. The bus did not work. Apparently, it worked to get them to the game. It just did not work to take them home from the game. And so my son calls, and it's like 11 o'clock when they're finally, I guess, giving up, and says, hey, the bus, we're still in the parking lot. So I get in my car, and I start driving to the game, back to the school, and I'm probably about three-quarters of the way there when he calls and says, hey, they got the bus working, and, you don't have to come get me. So I turn back around. I get home. I couldn't have been home 5 minutes. Get another call. Hey, the bus broke down again. We didn't get very far. And I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. So I'm back in the car I go. I pull out of my driveway. And right as I'm pulling out of my driveway, he calls me and says, hey, the backup bus is here. So you don't have to come get me. And long story short, it was after midnight. So it was just kind of a long, long day. It was an exciting game, great game. You can probably tell my voice a little off today. But that was how I spent my Thursday night, getting in and out of my car, deciding whether or not I needed to pick up my kid because the bus wasn't working. But anyway, they got it all handled, and the show must go on. All kinds of – there was actually a bunch of economic data out today. Probably the biggest or the most important one had to do with inflation and wages. Right? Because this is kind of like the hot-button issue. We'll break it down for you. It was soft. Let's just say the inflation number wasn't very good because no one's making any money, and they also had retail sales. Retail sales was soft as well. Again, automobiles, the big reason why. You can throw homes on top of that now, and we'll get to all of that. I want to read you an email from a customer, and I'll just use his initials. JG, and he emails me quite a bit. And he's mad because I keep telling you, hey, they can't build houses for, under $100,000. And he says, no, they can. And they can build a 600-square-foot house. That's an apartment. And they actually are building those, right? The home builders have gotten into that business, and they rent them. But it is absolutely possible. Right? If you build a small enough place, people could live, right? And obviously, when we talk about a house, and when I'm talking about houses, you got the wife, you got the two kids, the dog, and I happen to know that JG is single, so you're right, you could do it. And really, let's face it, if you had to, right, you could. All of us could. But it was funny. What I did like about what he sent me, he actually sent me where they're trying to, because, you've seen the TV shows where they're building these little houses, right, and they're putting them on a trailer. And the funny thing is he actually sent me a link about how they're trying to regulate those. They're trying to outlaw them. And, of course, it's the mobile home industry that's trying to get the government to outlaw the tiny houses and say that, the only thing that could be on wheels needs to be a recreational vehicle, and that falls into a whole different category, and it's harder to get a loan for it and all that other stuff. But it really is, it's a problem. How can we not be able to build homes that people can afford? And it shouldn't have to be 600 square feet. I mean, it really boggles the mind when you think about it. You look at it, the percentages keep telling the story. Home ownership in the United States has steadily been declining for the last 10 years. And it hasn't stopped, despite them trying to say there's a housing recovery and there's all these. The realities are very simple. Not everyone can afford a 2,200 square foot home. But what is true is, and whether it's 1,800, 1,600, 2,200, 3,000, 1,200 square feet, we always used to be able to, or at least the vast majority of Americans used to be able to do it. We can't now. What's changed? We'll talk about that next. Welcome back, Patriot Radio News Hour. It's Friday. You know what? I'm out here, Dr. T's out here picking up some product, and I got so busy I forgot all about what it was that I was doing. But here's just another example. And I'm going to read to you what they're working on right now. Another attempt by the government to regulate all of us to death. The regulation is FR-5877-P-01. FR-5877-P-01. And it has to do with, you know what, I'll say this, a lot of people do this. This is the people that live in these RV parks as their permanent residence, right? And this also has to do with all the tiny houses, right? The shows they show the glamorous lifestyle of the 400, 500, 600 square foot trailer where they build your home and you can just take it wherever you go, right? And they show pictures of people kayaking and skiing and snowboarding and boating, doing all this great stuff. Because I don't know where you're going to put all the stuff you need to do all those things in that little space, little home. They never show that part. But this is something the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's putting the finishing touches on the proposed regulation that would make living in an RV or a mobile tiny home illegal for most people. And what they mean by illegal is what they want to do is get rid of an exemption for recreational vehicles. It would redefine the industry, forcing HUD regulations on those people that do this. The new regulations are set, and really kind of a nod to the manufactured home. I'm making an assumption that the manufactured home industry is behind the legislation. But what they would like to do, the RVs would be redefined. Okay, so whether it's an actual RV and you're living in the RV, or you got the tiny house that's built on the trailer, that they're both considered the same. As a factory-built vehicular structure, therefore not certified as a manufactured home, designed only for recreational use and not as a primary residence or for permanent occupancy. This means you'll either fall under the HUD regulations, your little tiny home, forcing you to comply with HUD building codes. In other words, it would make it impossible. I don't understand it. What does the government care where you live, right? Hey, if I want to live in my RV, or if I want to live in a tiny house, or I want to live in a 10,000 square foot palace, right? As long as, and obviously people have been living in RVs for how long? Forever, as far as I know. Let's face it, I've only been around since 1970, so that's forever for me. But I want to just thank my friends for that information. I did not even know that was happening, but just all these things that fall under the radar and nobody's talking about, right? Everyone's talking about tax cuts and who the next Federal Reserve chief is going to be, and is North Korea going to launch another missile or blow up an atomic bomb in the middle of the ocean and all that other stuff. And while that's all happening, right, all these other things always slip through the cracks, right? They like the Patriot Act and when they bailed out the banks too big to fail, right? And they said they fixed all this stuff, and really when you actually got done with it, and whether it was 5 years or 10 years, 15 years later, what we really end up finding out is they've taken away more liberty. That's really all they did. Right? I mean, too big to fail is that's an easy one. Because they didn't make them smaller. Right? They made them bigger. Right? There are fewer and fewer banks in the United States. Matter of fact, at levels we haven't seen in the modern generation. They've been closing them. They've been gobbling up each other. And of course, a lot of people don't know that those regulations got changed in the 80s. Banks weren't allowed to be that big because they knew they knew. Hey, if we get them too big, it becomes risky, and you can take out the whole economy and all that other stuff. And then what we found out later is, okay, yeah, you kind of misled us because the headlines all said we're fixing too big to fail, right? And people only read headlines. Why read the actual details of it? And then, of course, if you did read the article, most of them were telling you this is a great thing. What they didn't want to tell you was the realities were, no, by the way, not only are we not going to get rid of it, we're going to make sure that you're not allowed to get out of it. See, that was their solution to fixing too big to fail. Their solution was, you know what? We're going to stop all the bank run nonsense. We're just not going to let people take any money out. And if the bank is bad enough, forget about a bailout. We'll just go in and, borrow some of these deposits. Of course, they're not yours anyway, right? I've established that. Hopefully you know that now, right? When you deposit the money in the bank, it's no longer yours. Right? And they'll just, take some of it. But don't worry. When they take some of it, they'll give you some stock in the new bank. And eventually, maybe, down the road sometime, maybe you can get your money back. And then, you sit there like this regulation that I just read you. It's nonsense. What are we wasting our time on? And this is kind of how the government works, right? Everything's a big corporate-sponsored something or other, right? And same thing, like the tax cuts and all of that, I'm sure they're going to take sides. Yesterday I told you I was going to read what the DNC said, and then I forgot. It's been a tough week. So here's what the Democrats said, and I don't understand. Why wouldn't they want to all get together and say, hey, let's try to keep less of the people's money? But I always think that's a great idea. The problem with it is that I always have is if you just have less government, you'd be able to take less money, right? We don't need tax cuts, right? We don't need corporation bailouts. And all. What we need is less government. if you had less government, I mean, it's pretty simple stuff, then you need less money. And if you need less money, you don't have to take it from the citizenry. Unfortunately for us, none of what I just said is in any of that tax legislation. Matter of fact, the only thing that's really in there is we're going to spend more money, right? We need more money for defense. We need more money for the veterans. We need to get an infrastructure project going. We need more money for bridges. We need more money for roads. We need more money for all this stuff. And in the meantime, while we need the more money, we're going to try to take in less. And the answer, you know that's not right. And then, it'll pay for itself with economic growth. And it won't. It never does. And really they like to go to the Reagan cuts. Don't be fooled. That was a much different time. When Ronald Reagan took office, interest rates were 19%. When he left, they were 6%. Yes, there was a tax cut in there, but interest rates fell from 19 to 6. Right? Interest rates now are they're between 1 and 1.25. That's I guess they can't quite make up their mind if it's 1 or 1.25. So it's in between the two. So we're not going to get this huge reduction in interest rates. Could you imagine what the economy would do if interest rates were 19 and went to 6? It's going to do better. And so the illusion that this is somehow going to be a Reagan-era-like tax cut, just not going to happen. Which is probably the reason why a lot of these economists say that Trump can't get that, the mythical 3+% GDP growth. Right? The tax cuts aren't going to do that for you. Because what Reagan had was tax cuts and falling interest rates, and falling by a lot. And we have neither of those today. But anyway, they released a statement, and they said the Republican Party tax reform plan, nothing more than a thinly veiled giveaway to big corporations, that is the 1%. Which makes sense coming from an administration led by a billionaire tax cheat. This is the DNC now. A billionaire tax cheat who refuses to release his own tax returns. Yes, he's a private citizen. He has the right not to do it. Therefore, he must be a tax cheat. The tax plan hammered out by 2 former Wall Street executives, right? Again, there's no doubt of course it was. Listen, every bill they pass is hammered out by some major corporation, right? You think John McCain is sitting in his office typing up legislation? You think he's writing laws? You think Jeff Flake's out there on his keyboard, right, hammering out the 9-page tax bill they released? Of course not. Don't write any of it. I remember what Nancy Pelosi said, and you know what? We make fun of it, but it was true. Hey, we got to pass the bill before we even know what's in it. Right? I'm not reading that thing. We're just going to take their word for it. And this is how it all works. And then they went in, and just say a bunch of uglier, nastier things. And when did we become this nasty? When did that happen? When did it become okay to just be nasty all the time? I think part of it has to do with this new texting world and the internet world. People say things, but by typing them, that they would never verbalize. And now somehow this is kind of the new society we live in, and everyone's just nasty to each other. If someone's opinion is different, you used to have great debate. Part of the best memories I had growing up, and talking about the big holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter, was the older people, the adults, having the great debate, right? After dinner, right? The coffee came out, and of course, this was back in the time people smoked, right? So my grandpa's got to smoke, my uncle's got to smoke, everyone's got to smoke, and they just start talking, and it goes back and forth. And I told you, you tell the story. My grandfather was like the master, and he would get the feel for the room, and wherever the majority was, he was going the other way. Right? He wanted to stir the pot up. But it'd be great debate. Right? And then after the great debate was over and the coffee was done and they ate their cake, right? They all got the cards out and they start playing spades or hearts or pitch, whatever the game of the day. And it was, you know what? It was great. Everybody got to voice their opinion. Nobody was upset. Nobody got nasty. Now you read and people can't even be with their relatives because you like Trump and the other one doesn't, and you're a communist or you're a racist or it's incredible. No wonder why nothing can get done. Patriot Radio News Hour, halftime on a Friday.
This is the Phyllis Schlafly Report, a daily broadcast from Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, and we're upholding the legacy of Phyllis Schlafly, a constitutional attorney and articulate voice for traditional values for more than 70 years. Now, from the Phyllis Schlafly Center Studios, here's Ryan Haidt.
When government daycare conspirators realized that pro-family Ronald Reagan would never approve of their anti-family proposals, many suggested the 1988 presidential election would become a referendum on what America wanted to do with their children. Obviously, they changed their tune when George Bush took office. Government-run childcare had an inherent PR problem. No one, not even those who are generally in favor of government regulation, would want grandmothers to need registration in order to take care of their own grandchildren. That is exactly what government-run childcare would do. It would blindly impose standards regardless of whether the child care provider was a family member, a church daycare center, or some other similar institution. Phyllis wrote in 1997 that liberals thought they could just proclaim a crisis, wrap it in children, and try to intimidate Congress into funding a new middle-class entitlement. However, these liberals were sorely mistaken. Pro-family conservatives won the debate on government-run childcare because they pointed out the plague that follows almost every government-controlled industry. Government is incapable of delivering a product or service in a way that's most affordable, effective, or fair. If regulations are blind and unfeeling, why would we want to impose them on childcare? Leftists might disguise them as well-meaning health and safety standards, but Phyllis Schlafly cut right to the truth. A grandmother would be required to demonstrate that she complies with federal health, safety, and nutrition standards, and would have to submit daily reports proving the food she feeds her grandchildren meets those standards. Phyllis was a master of recognizing flaws in liberal ideology, and she was a master of convincingly pointing out those flaws to the American people. The debate on government daycare is far from over. If conservatives are to win on this and other key issues, we must show liberal policies at their logical conclusion. Conservatives need to remind all Americans that we fight for people and for their right to work, raise their families, and live free of oppressive and unnecessary government interference.
This has been the Phyllis Schlafly Report from Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. The traditional family is the building block of our communities and country. That's why it's imperative to support strong marriages, respect fathers, and champion stay-at-home moms. At phyllisschlafly.com, we oppose the liberal attempt to redefine the family. To join us, visit phyllisschlafly.com. Thanks for listening, and join us again next time for the Phyllis Schlafly Report.
Welcome back. Patriot Radio News Hour. Our toll-free number, 800-951-0592. I got Dr. T in here with me, and I always like having him in because he's got a lot of knowledge. And I always like learning from people that have come before I have, and he's done a lot of radio in his day. and he's also a great customer of ours, and I just love it when you come in.
Thanks, Joe.
Because that always, and I'm going to tell you why, I'm not going to lie. I love it because that means you bought something and you're coming to pick it up.
You're right. Well, I always say, you got to put a little bit away, and you got to keep at it, because eventually what's real will be real.
And it's great. It's like the tortoise and the hare, right? Right? And you want to be the tortoise because the tortoise wins, right? And gold's boring, right? It's not flashy and at times you're like, well, but the hare's winning, right? I need to be the hare because he's not going to win.
Instant gratification,
right? He's not. We already know he's not going to win, right? And everybody that does it, I had his book. I think, there it is. It's underneath yours. It was Rogoff who wrote the book. It's called The Curse of Cash. So if you don't believe me, here's a guy. Was the head economist for the IMF and the World Bank and the Federal Reserve. I mean, this guy's he's one of those great academics. And he writes this book that highlights fiat money. And every single chapter, as he starts in the Ming Dynasty all the way through today, fiat money, and every chapter ended the same way. Oh, it became worthless. And then he goes on to the next one. But then we did it. And it became worthless. And then it became worthless. And he's still out there thinking, look how great it is. Don't get me wrong. You would think the book would be, hey, we should probably try something else. But that's not what he wanted to do, right? Of course not. We'll just make a better mousetrap, and eventually we'll build the right one, and it'll work, even though it never has. And this is my point. Right? We already know the tortoise is going to win. The tortoise is gold. It's won for 5,000 years. And it's going to keep on winning. Yes, is it boring? Yes. Is it glamorous? No. Right? Is it going to be talked about on the idiot box day after day? Well, sometimes they like to tell you why you shouldn't own it. Right? Ben Bernanke likes to tell you gold isn't money, but yet our Constitution says it is. But somehow they want you to believe that it's not. But staying at it, consistency is really, that's how you do it. You put it away, Doesn't matter what the price. Look, today it's down $1, big deal. I don't care if it's down 20 or it's up 50. It doesn't matter. Because we already know what the end game is going to be. And then you start thinking about what's happening today, and you got that feeling. It's like, man, how many more of these bubbles can we take?
My grandpa once said he lost $250,000 today. Said the price of hogs went up, and I didn't have any to sell.
That's always a bad thing. Right? And really, at the end of the day, if you don't have any gold and you don't have any silver, it's not going to be a good day for you. Right? Because you're not going to have any. And you're going to need to have it. And why do I say it with conviction? Because I got 5,000 years of history on my side.
Absolutely. And I told you before, gold is the money of kings, silver is the money of princes, and debt is the money of paupers.
And it's funny you talk about the debt. There was a great article, and I'll get it up on our website because I want to save it for Monday. So on Monday show, make sure you tune in. Man, like I said, it's been a tough week. I didn't get enough sleep last night. I woke up late the other day. I killed the phone. Turns out, by the way, I did not kill the phone. The phone lived. I killed the cord. We replaced the cord, and it was all good. But all of this GDP, we can't get any right now. Just the study that was done, we really haven't had any GDP growth. The only growth that has occurred is the amount of debt that we carry. And it doesn't matter, and it doesn't discriminate, right? Household debt, and then you know what? You hit all the big ones, right? Mortgages, autos, credit card, student loan, and default rates. Matter of fact, there's an article again today. Student loan defaults surging again. I keep telling.
Well, the reason, when we really look at debt, and you really want to understand why is there debt, it always goes back to the same thing. We live in a world of instant gratification. We need it. We don't need it. We want it. What we need, we already have. We want stuff.
Stuff. That's right. Stuff. And you know what? You can't take the stuff with you. And you know what's so funny? When I talk about and I think about my childhood and all the great memories I have, almost none of it revolves around stuff. It revolves around the interactions, whether it was my family or my friends, my wife, right? The stuff is nice, but that's not what matters.
No, we found stuff, rocks and sticks.
Right? Yeah. Listen, when I grew up, okay, you played cops and robbers, and you used your finger, right?
Yeah, it actually went bang.
Yeah, right. I mean, that was it. I mean, if you got really crazy, like the great thing was you're walking around in the woods and you found a stick that looked like a gun.
Uh-oh. You could put an eye out.
Right? You were the man then. Right? Everybody else was bad because you had a stick that looked like a gun and they only had a finger. Right now, today, I know, I'm not alone. My kids they're on that video box all day. It feels like all day. And of course they're not, they're doing, but when they've got free time, they're not outside. They're not running around. They're playing the video game. And this is like real life war type stuff. I mean, it's incredible what they've done. I can't play them. But it really is. It's an addiction, and it's gotten to the point now where now even the basic things like owning a home. You're right. We could build a 600-square-foot home. You could. No, they're not gonna, right? But they could. And like I said, they do. The ones that you do, they're called apartments. And usually when you are single, that's where you live. But the realities are the home ownership, which is the biggest part of the American dream, is disappearing. And the simple answer is debt is the reason. You just don't understand that that's the reason. Patriot Radio News Hour. We'll be right back. Patriot Radio News Hour, 800-951-0592. Sitting in here with Dr. T this morning on a Friday, and just, talking about, the tortoise and the hare and debt and stuff and government regulations. And, they talk about these tax cuts and, really think about really what it is they're trying to sell us. Right? I mean, there's no better bovine specialist than the guys that are running the establishment. Hey, you know what? We're running $1 trillion deficit, and of course, when you factor it all in, that's what it comes up to. They don't call it $1 trillion like this year. It's almost over. The government's fiscal year ends this weekend, and when I get back on Monday, from a fiscal standpoint, the federal government thinks it's 2018. When they total up all the debt, when they go back to October 1st, 2016, they go all the way to the last day of September 2017. Okay? What was the debt on October 1st? What was the debt the last day of September? Whatever the difference between, if we go back to the math that you started to learn in like first grade. This is just basic addition and subtraction. Okay? Just the number's a lot bigger. But the difference between those two numbers would be how much the deficit went up that year.
They're going to leave out.
Yep.
They're going to leave out all of the calamities that we've had.
Correct.
Because that won't factor in.
That doesn't happen. That's a one-off. Right. They're kind of like the corporate. Well, excluding how much we had to pay to close all the stores and fire all these people, we had a really good quarter.
Right.
Right? It's kind of like Toys R Us. Right. But remember, they filed bankruptcy. It's the second largest retail bankruptcy we've ever seen, and that's from a dollar standpoint. Because let's face it, Toys R Us is kind of dying anyway. But their CEO, our stores are profitable.
One more natural disaster for this country. I would say that we've got some considerations to be made about how we're going to function.
You think about it. Even have you noticed how Puerto Rico doesn't get a lot of press?
Right.
No one wants to talk about that. Right. The power's been out for coming on 2 weeks now.
Well, they were bankrupt before this.
Right.
Ever
Well,
happened.
that's right. They don't want to talk about it because they. Right. Listen, we're going to quietly, hopefully, in some disaster relief, slide in some legislation where we slip Puerto Rico $200 billion, and we'll just add it onto the debt, but don't worry, we'll get it back later. And, and like I said, like the Toys R Us, hey, our stores are profitable if we just didn't have to pay the debt. Right? If we didn't have all this debt and we didn't have to borrow all this money, we could be making money.
Boy, there were a lot of businesses that did that.
Right. I mean, hey, my household finances would be terrific if I didn't have to pay my debt.
You last 3 years.
Right? Hey, that credit card bill, I'm not going to pay that. Oh, the mortgage, I don't need to pay that. Car payment, you know what? If I don't pay those debts, I look real good.
Speaking of car payments, look what's happening with that.
Boy, I don't know how people do it. Like I said, I did the story about the $2 an hour auto worker in Mexico. And the car's $40,000. And they built it with $2 an hour labor. Right? What would it cost if you had to come here and build it here? Right? Now what, 45? 50? 60?
Now we have a lot of used to ownerships, too. I used to own it.
I used to own it, but now I lease. That's right. Right? Because it's better to rent the car than it is to buy the car. And of course, another one of the great scams of quote unquote ownership, the lease. But you start looking at all of this stuff, and you're like, hey, they're trying to sell us this tax cut. When the realities are, what they should be trying to sell us is, hey, we're going to shrink the size of our government.
Spending cuts.
Yes, so we can allow you to keep more of your money.
But when you're used to getting it, you're not used to not getting it.
No, and that's right. That's the biggest problem. You look at, like, all these pensions. I don't know what's going to happen. Cities and states, now, the next 10 years, it's all going to be the same. Okay, well, you're going to take less, right? We're going to tax you more, and every 2 years we're going to come back to you and say, you're going to take less, and we're going to tax you more, and then 2 years after that, okay, you're going to take less, and we're going to tax you more, right? Because it's so big, it's so massive, it's truly one of those things where I don't know how any of this works, right? There can't be tax cuts when all of a sudden now the people that are retired want their pension check.
The swamp has a sucking sound.
Draining the swamp. I don't know how you drain it. I mean, because let's face it, most people don't want to hear this message I'm saying today.
No, you quit feeding the critters that live in it.
Right? We need the government, right? We need it, right? They're the ones that send me my food stamps. Right? They're the ones that put money in my account every month. They're the ones that are supposed to allegedly, right, they maintain the streets and the roads and the sewers. And of course, none of these people have any knowledge of, I shouldn't say none, I'm sure some of them do. The vast majority, when you vote for somebody to be, on the city council or the mayor or whatever, do you have any financial experience? Because really, that's what you need now.
Huh?
In what? No, I just want to fix. There's potholes. I want to fix them, but we don't have any money to fix them. Well, can we borrow some? Sure. Well, we borrowed upteen trillions of it now, and like I said, you think the hare's winning? Don't worry, because we already know what's going to happen. The tortoise wins the race. Patriot Radio News Hour, final segment coming up. Final segment, Patriot Radio News Hour. I just want to give an update. I made a mistake. I own it. It was my fault. There's some people waiting on 20s. They were all supposed to go out today. It won't go out till Tuesday. And the mistake was mine. I thought I had told the bullion bank to send them. They said I didn't. I swore that I did, but apparently they said no. So either way, I own it. They'll go out Tuesday. So for those of you waiting on those, I apologize. Yesterday, we ran Silver Eagles $3.95 a roll. We're keeping that price. It's a nothing day in the gold and silver markets. Gold's down $1, silver's down a couple of cents. We found our first Fed governor that wants to raise rates. So we've had 3 come out saying, forget it. The Philadelphia Fed governor says that the labor market's tight, and he's sticking to the wages are going to rise thing. So it's 3-1 for no rate hike in December, but he's the first one. Wall Street's really not moving either. It's kind of a quiet Friday. The Dow's down 15. The S&P's up a couple of points as people are kind of weighing the tax cuts. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? How big is it going to be? Is it not going to be? Donald Trump is now interviewing people for the Fed job. So does that mean, is Janet Yellen going to be out? If so, who's going to replace her? All of those things. And like I said, none of that stuff. It's just noise. It doesn't matter. Just noise. And then, we're in the break, Dr. T and I were talking, and it's been a really interesting year with the earthquakes and the hurricanes. And did you see they had this big rock slide in Yosemite, and everyone knows, that's kind of where that super volcano is, right, underneath there. And I'm just like, man, I don't like it. I don't like any of that stuff. I don't, when I don't have control, I don't like to be on an airplane. I don't like, I live in a state, let's face it, Arizona, right? We don't really get earthquakes or hurricanes or tornadoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. There's a reason why I'm here. It's not just the weather. I don't like any of that stuff.
Keep your oars in the water.
Right. When all of a sudden your house starts shaking for no reason, yeah, I'm out. I don't want to be there. So anyway, we'll see. He called it Dutch sense. Right, this guy is a earthquake expert.
Right.
And he's kind of talking. Remember, and I even said it the one day. It's been kind of working its way up from Mexico.
Right. And the way this whole thing works has to do with ground leverages and fault leverages. That earthquake that happened down in Mexico, that 8.1, actually shifted the earth 32 feet. And the relief of that pressure, you're going to always see that pressure being released wherever they're doing fracking. Believing it or not, fracking does involve opening the earth and allowing pressures to be administered into those particular areas. So where there's areas of least amount of activity, you're going to see activity beginning to go, depending on which way that fault line is moving and stuff. So we live in some interesting times, and like I said, keep your oars in the water, your ears attuned, and your eyes open, and be alert.
Yeah, and try to really understand what really is happening, right?
Exactly.
Just try to do it. Keep tuning in. Keep listening. And keep putting it away. Just a little bit at a time. 800-951.
Get it when you can.
There you go. 951-0592. Dr. T, always a pleasure. Hey, listen, have a great weekend. Besides all the doom and gloom, have a great weekend. We'll be back on Monday.